Hi, my name is Robert Shelley with Shelley Law, and I'm an attorney that assists nurse practitioners with employment contract and independent contractor agreement issues. Today, I'm going to talk about nurse practitioner relocation reimbursement. So, if an NP is moving for a new job, how much should the employer kick in for their relocation? And then some, things to think about. First, I think NPs are, I'd say, less likely to move to a brand new city specifically for a job. You come up as an RN, you're working in a city, probably go to school, maybe while you're working as well, and then finally get through the program, do your didactic and clinical stuff, become an NP. I just think it's less common for an NP to move to a new city versus like a physician who's just coming out of residency or fellowship, and it's very common for them to move, somewhere far away. So if you are in the situation where you're moving as an NP, how much can you expect for your move? Well, I think it depends upon the setting. If you're moving into a hospital or healthcare network, they'll generally kick in a little bit more. Somewhere between $5,000 to $10,000 would be a reasonable amount. Whereas if you're going into private practice, it can vary. Some places will just say, no, we're not going to pay you anything. And others maybe up to $5,000 and no more than that. Now, the timing of that payment matters, and the language in the contract matters. The most common way to do it is just to pay you let's just use $10,000 as an example. They'll pay you $10,000 in your first pay period after you start. Well, some people could use some of that money to defray the cost of moving in advance of moving out there. So you certainly can get language that says perhaps you get the $10,000, the date that you sign the contract, not the date that you start providing care for the employer. Now, there's going to be almost always some kind of language that states if you don't stay for a period of time, you're going to have to pay either the entire amount or a prorated amount back to the employer, and that is completely standard. So once again, I'll give you an example. So let's say they gave you $10,000, maybe they paid it with your first pay period. There'll be language that says if you leave within the first year, you have to pay back the entire amount, or perhaps you have to stay 2 years, or there can be some kind of forgiveness schedule. They could do it annually, they could do it quarterly, they could do it monthly. And so, for instance, let's say it's an annual forgiveness and it's a 2-year forgiveness period. If you stay for a year, half of the $10,000 is forgiven. If you stay for another year, the entire amount is forgiven and you don't have to pay anything back. This is generally taxed, so even if they're going to provide you with $10,000, you're not going to receive $10,000. It'll be whatever the taxed amount is. However, if you get into a situation where you leave the employer, early, they will want you to pay back the entire amount, not the taxable amount that you received. So if you received $6,000, then they still want you to pay back the $10,000, and then you're going to have to deal with your accountant in the next year to get some of that money back. There are also, times where you'll receive, in addition to the relocation assistance, a signing bonus as well. Some places will lump the two together. Some places will keep the two separate. And then last thing about relocation reimbursement, there's different ways of doing it. Some will just give you the lump sum money and you can do whatever you want with it. Some will require actual receipts, meaning however, literally whatever you paid for the moving company or whatever you want, you have to give that to them and they will reimburse you for it. And you may not even receive the full $10,000 if it didn't, take that much to move. Some places, and mostly hospitals or large healthcare network, will have their own, kind of moving service that they utilize, and then you would just simply have to use whatever service they have. Is there a better one than the other? Well, certainly. Would you prefer $10,000 that you can do whatever you want, or have to provide actual receipts? Then obviously you just want the $10,000. Maybe you can move extremely cheaply, and if you had to provide receipts, then you wouldn't get the full amount. So you can advocate, this is negotiable. So you can always say, well, instead of having to provide receipts, I prefer just to give me the lump sum bonus, and I can do with it what I want. All right, that's a little bit about nurse practitioner relocation reimbursement allowances. If you have any questions about your employment contract or independent contractor agreement, feel free to contact my law firm at the information listed below in the description, and I appreciate you watching the video. All right, thanks. Take care.